sleepovers at Mike's house growing up, and his parents would always order the good stuff. We'd get Domino's, and I was like, oh man, this is living. And my house, we'd always have like frozen Tombstone pizzas. Mike went all out.
This is a fun episode we have this week, and there's a lot we're going to dive into, but you know this guy, Mike.
I do. I grew up with Tyler. We used to do sleepovers together with all our buddies. We played Little League together, and it was really fun as a kid seeing this huge guy, this tall guy. He was over 6 foot tall, I think by 5th grade. And I was very close friends with him. And the two of us walking down the hall, it was quite a sight because I'm not the tallest person.
Well, we're going to hear his whole story. He went overseas, played basketball for 12 years, wrote a book about his being in a billion different countries playing basketball and what that's done for him as a person, as a leader, all of that. Wonderful stories he has too.
Also, some of the stories on how he was recruited from colleges and what that process was like. I thought it was very interesting.
He'll talk about successes and failing. I've got a failure story for you, Mike. I love failure stories. I've got one where I failed as a leader. I kind of failed as a dad. So my daughter was 18 months old. My wife was in Miami at book club because that's where you go for book club.
It's a nice book club.
So I'm looking at for my 18-month-old daughter at the time. She falls backwards and hits her head on the coffee table.
Oh, geez.
And cries for a hot minute, but she's a superhero. She bounced back. She's fine, running around. I'm like, oh my goodness, you okay? I felt horrible. Then she's trying to crawl on a stool about 10 minutes later and falls off there and cries again. And I know she had a spot of blood on her foot. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what did she do? So I took her into the bathroom and I sat her on the counter and I looked, are you okay? I'm wiping off her foot. And then I look in the mirror and the whole back of her head is blood.
Oh, geez.
And I'm freaking out, trying to get a hold of my wife in Miami, who's on book club. And I took her to immediate care, the wrong one, of course, one that doesn't really handle stuff. It's a pediatric immediate care, but didn't handle this type of thing. And they're like, she needs staples. We can't do this here. At this point, she's just playing. She doesn't care. She's fine. Right. But there's a gash in the back of her head and it is sizable. So they're like, if you can hold her tight, we can do these staples right here, right now. And okay, let's do this. Let's do this. So they swaddle her up and then she starts freaking out because she didn't want to be bound, right? But swaddle her up. One doctor is holding her feet. A nurse is holding her midsection. I'm cradling her head, talking to her. It's fine. You're going to be fine. I keep kissing her forehead as they're doing this. It's fine. It's fine. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're going to be great. You're doing great. You're kissing her forehead. Then I realized the entire time I was kissing the nurse's hand, not my daughter's forehead, the nurse's hand. So it was all of a sudden, what am I doing? It was an older nurse. She looked at me and said, "It's okay, sweetie. It's okay." To me. So my failure in that moment and that older nurse's leadership put me at ease for the task at hand. But I'm going to tell my daughter that story when she gets married going, by the way, I kissed the nurse's hand when they were stapling you together and I failed, but the nurse succeeded.
Oh, that's amazing. Did she give you a phone number?
I left without it. See, I failed multiple times that day. But anyway.
We've got a good one here today with Tyler Smith coming right up. So our next guest knows something about leadership and teamwork, playing on a great Penn State team, going deep into the NCAA tournament, and then playing international pro ball in many different countries also. Tyler is also an author. He wrote a hilarious book named Called for Traveling. So let's please welcome my old pal, Tyler Smith.
Yay!
Hey, what's up, guys? Great to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me. I think
Thanks for
if you
coming.
write a book, automatically, like, you get qualified to do really cool stuff like this, even if the book's not that good, I think.
I think, knowing you for a very long time, you've always had natural leadership qualities, and one of the main reasons people gravitate to you as a leader is because you're tall. No, I'm just kidding. It's not because you're tall.
It helps.
It's
Definitely helps.
it, no. You're smart. You're charismatic. You're trustworthy, and you honestly, genuinely care about people. So I guess my first question for you is, can you still slam dunk?
Well, how high is the hoop? That's my question.
Normal height.
Normal height. I can't. I'm gonna need some good warm up. But like anytime, like I've coached kids and coached my daughter from like third grade to ninth grade, and they're always like, "Dunk it, dunk," because that's all kids want to see, right? They don't care if you can shoot. They want to see somebody dunk it because that's pretty neat when you're like, you know, 3.5 or 4 feet tall. So I can still dunk it, but man, it's not pretty. And I think what they imagine when somebody dunking it is like through the legs 360, and I'm like kind of barely rub dunking it like into the
So
basket.
you're not Shaquille O'Neal and like bringing down the whole hoop or anything like that.
Yeah, I have not broken a backboard since like the little Nerf hoop thing in my room when I was probably in middle school.
You can fit a credit card almost under my vertical. Almost. Well,
Yes.
Tyler, for those who aren't familiar, your journey has been unique because you had that great run, as Mike said, at Penn State, undrafted. So you chose to go overseas, and you were overseas for about 12 years, I believe, right? And over that time, you got to experience Japan, Turkey, Argentina, Sweden, all over the place. And you wrote this great book about it. And it's not just about the basketball, it's about the ability to deal with unique cultures, different ways of playing the game, and loneliness. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit later as well. But the central theme of your book is perseverance, adaptability, and passion for this game. So, unlike other NBA stars out there, your challenges were language barriers, cultural differences, unpredictability of contracts, or even getting paid sometimes. So, to start that, how did you not give up? 12 years is a long basketball career, no matter where you're at. What kept you going, Tyler?
Yeah, well, I had different kind of goals and dreams along the way. My first was like, how do I avoid a real world job? How can I just keep playing this basketball game and actually make money at it? And as I was a junior or senior at Penn State, I saw some guys that were Penn State grads that were overseas in Europe, and they're actually like making money and making some pretty good money. And the one guy said, "Hey, man, I just signed a 3-year deal for $500,000." And I'm thinking, dude, this is amazing. Like, there's no NIL money back in the day, right? This is like this is early 2000s. And so, if you got, $80 in meal money, like over Christmas break, like that was a lot of money, a lot of cash in your pocket all of a sudden. So this guy was like, "Hey, I'm making really good money." I'm like, "Well, shoot, I'm not as good as him, but I feel like, maybe even if I'm half as good as him, and I'll take 250." So I had these wild expectations of how much guys should make. And then my first offer comes in to play in Holland, and it's for like just under 20 grand. And I'm like, man, I don't know what happened, between my expectations and like, and where we are here with the numbers, but I guess I got to take it. So I took this first job, and I was very driven to like play in better countries, to earn more, to really maximize my playing ability, because I felt like in 4 years of college I'd improved a lot from freshman to senior year. My freshman year, and when talking to my teammates, they're like, "Yeah, man, we were a little unsure like how things are going to pan out for you," because I didn't maybe have the foot speed or have the skills like some of these other guys. But like one thing I knew, like I was never going to be outworked by anybody, and so that was something that I saw early on could really helped take me to that next level of just outworking guys and being a little bit smarter. I had a teammate that came in the same year as I did, and man, he had this NBA body, this athleticism off the charts, fastest guy on the team, strongest guy on the team as a freshman, and yet he couldn't remember a play to save his life. And quick funny story, we're playing at Michigan State. They're number one in the country at the time, and we had a bunch of foul guys in foul trouble. And so our coach calls this guy, and he's like, "Hey, man, you're in." And he's like, "What do you mean? Like I never played." Like, we're lucky he had his jersey on, like underneath his warm ups. So he comes in the game, and I'm in the game at the time, and he comes up to me with these big eyes, and he's like, "Hey, Tyler, you just tell me what to do, and I'll do it," because he didn't know any of the plays. I'm like, "Listen, just guard that guy over there. Start here." And so he guards him, and he's got the adrenaline pumping. He blocks a shot. He grabs a rebound, and Michigan State is like, "Who's this guy?" Like he's not even on our scouting report. And then all of a sudden he's gassed, like he hits the wall because he's not in any kind of game shape. And so he's calling for a stop, and he's like, "Get me out, man, get me out." And our coach is like, nobody's even paying attention to him at this point. We can't even believe he's in there. And then he's trying to get the ref's attention. He's like fouling the guy, and the ref doesn't. So he just grabs his guy's jersey and just follows him around the court until finally the ref sees it and calls a foul, and they get him out of the game. But it always made me laugh because here's this guy with this incredible athletic ability and talent that's God given and all this, but he never played. And so I just felt if I could separate myself just with pure effort, I'm only gonna have so much athleticism, but I think there's other ways to be successful.
Tyler, as you jumped from country to country and played with all these different teams, can you speak to kind of the learning process of different cultures and different languages, and perhaps the struggle with that? Also, having that kind of common thing, basketball, binding you or bridging you to these people and these new locations.
Yeah, great question. So when you go to these other countries, and I've been out of the country just like once or twice in high school, but for short stints. And when you go on vacation, it's totally different than like immersing yourself and living there for a year at a time. And that's ultimately what we were doing as players. All these teams would have two or three Americans typically on a team, and then everybody else is from that country that you're in. So whether I was in Japan or Holland or Italy, you have to be able to adapt to whatever situation you're in. And the people that can adapt faster, those guys, they do the best. I remember playing for a team in Holland, and this guy, he was so talented, crazy athletic. He could have had a long career, but about maybe 3 or 4 months into this season, he just like shut down. And he was like this really lively, fun guy. And all of a sudden, like we couldn't get two words out of him. And he could not adapt. He was so homesick, and he just wasn't able to kind of be comfortable where he was and embrace a lot of the just differences in culture. And as a result, like he made it through the year, but then that was it. I don't think he ever went overseas again. And this is a guy who could have made a lot of money playing overseas. So I remember playing with another guy, and I asked him. He was like this 6'10" black guy, really great personality and really talented and hard worker. And he played I think college ball at Miami. And he was like, "Man, wherever I go, I'm just like a chameleon. I'm just like a chameleon." And I love that expression where, here's this guy that like he doesn't blend in anywhere overseas, and yet he was like, "Hey man, I'm willing to just roll with whatever I need to." And so I love that mentality that he had. And I tried to adopt some of that myself. So I was always trying to really embrace like where I was, and try the foods that the people offer you, and try going to the different sites that people suggest, because you're in their country, and if you try to make it like America, it's never going to work.
It's a great point. And talk to me a little bit about leading on the court, right? Especially when you come in as, from America, and your team is made up of people that are international. How tough is that? And obviously, as you get longer in your career, you're the veteran on the court, so people are looking to you. But How difficult is it to lead in that multicultural world that you're on the court with?
Yeah, it's a little tricky at first, and so you want to kind of see because there's going to be guys there already that maybe have some kind of a established leadership, usually local guys, but leaders will often separate themselves pretty quickly. Like it doesn't take long to figure out like, okay, this guy is the veteran, he's kind of in charge. You can either partner up with him or follow his lead. I was really fortunate to have really good leaders on other teams that I played with. And sometimes when you're like the 22-year-old and you got like a 31-year-old guy who's got a couple of kids and has been around this league, then it's very easy to respect a guy like that if he knows what he's doing. But then it was interesting to kind of grow into more of a leadership role. Like when I was down in Uruguay a couple of times, and it was the first time where the coach said to me right as the season started, "Hey, you got the green light. You should be shooting 15 to 20 times a game." And I'm like, no one's ever said this to me. This is phenomenal. Like I'm in, man. So from there, I think also too, if you're putting in the work and guys see that, I think it's very easy to earn guys respect. And I remember another quick story. I was down in Uruguay. It was my second game, and I really had a great game. I scored like 35 points, and I felt like, boom, that really. And guys were coming to me after the game, like, "Oh man, that was great." And it was like, okay, that kind of like set the tone for here's an American like we can trust that's gonna be able to perform for us. So when you work your tail off and then you actually do perform when it comes time, I think that goes a long way for leading guys on the court.
That's awesome. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of these unique cultural from Argentina to Sweden, Japan, Turkey, Uruguay. You've been to a lot of places, and I'm sure you've got a billion stories, and we're going to tap into those. We're going to take a quick break. A truck isn't just a truck, especially if it's a car. But guess what? This is actually a truck. Or is it a car? Or is it a truck? Discover the new Spartacus hybrid pickup, where the city meets the suburbs and everywhere in between. A hybrid for the hybrid work schedule. Be present in the moment or be far away. Just be yourself, loud and proud, as long as you're on mute. Drive with confidence, knowing you're at the forefront of automotive innovation, but only if you have to, because nobody needs to be in an office 5 days in a row. Visit your Spartacus hybrid dealership today.
So I have a question for you, Tyler, about getting recruited. You're a 16, 17, 18-year-old person. You have these huge institutions and people knocking on your door, calling you. What did that feel like? Like being a kid and having a huge university want you to play for them. It had to have been kind of, I don't know. I think for me, seeing it firsthand, I was just in awe about the whole process. So if you can just speak a little bit about that process, and also, did you get a gym bag full of money, and did your dad get a tractor?
I was always hoping to get my very own tractor. A kid in the suburbs
Right.
with this John Deere tractor. Um, so it was a neat experience. It started getting a little more serious like my sophomore year in high school, and I was fortunate because we had another really good player, Ed Cage, who was 2 years ahead of me. He was a senior, and he was getting recruited by a lot of D1 schools like Marquette and Bradley. And so I think that kind of brought some visibility to our school and to me. And height always jumps out for college coaches. So I was a 6'6" freshman, 6'7" sophomore, and I was going to some summer camps. And so the amount of mail I would get was crazy. Every day I would come on like, okay, what is it today? And I got mail from all over, like from D3 schools, like Wheaton College to, I remember getting stuff from Duke and Michigan. I'm like, Duke and Michigan. I'm like, this is amazing. And, they had no idea who I was. I was just a name on a list, but you like to play games in your mind and think that like you're special to Coach K. Uh, but I remember getting stuff, and some of the mail was so silly. Like I would get stuff from, I got stuff from Northwestern, and the coach at the time, forgetting his name, but he was so goofy, and he would superimpose his picture next to Dennis Rodman, and it would just say, "Coach knows how to have a great time." And we're like,
It's amazing.
what? Yeah, like he's partying with Rodman or something. And I got something from Indiana State. They sent me the top 10 like table manners that you should have at the dinner table. And I'm like, this is so weird. But then as it went along, it got more personal. I narrowed it down a little bit. I looked at some Big Ten schools. I took trips to like Notre Dame, even Illinois, schools that were kind of close. And funny enough, those two schools actually didn't end up offering scholarships. So, you're kind of, they're treating you like, oh, everything's so great and we want you. But then when it came down to it, they didn't always offer a scholarship. But I got offers from other places like Richmond, some other kind of mid-level D1s, and then when I went on my visit to Penn State, I was like, man, this is a really neat place. Even the funny thing is about Penn State is they spelled my name wrong on the first letter they sent me. I'm like,
Oh no.
Smith, really? You mess up Smith? Like, I'm definitely not going there. You know, Duke's writing me letters. Why would I go to Penn State? They're a football school.
Right.
But when I went there, met the guys, met the coaches, just really fell in love with the place and just could see myself being there. And I'm like, and it's in the Big Ten. All the schools are kind of nearby, like where I grew up in Chicago. So it ended up being an awesome fit for me, even though nobody really thinks of Penn State as a basketball school. To me, it was a special place, and I live 10 minutes from campus now.
Didn't travel too far, but you did travel far, going from packed arenas in the Big Ten to some smaller stadiums globally. And talk about that transition. And also, you mentioned there's times where you were worried that the checks wouldn't cash, and you're thousands of miles away from home. Talk about that perseverance that you had to go through.
So you bring up a great point. So we're playing in packed arenas against Michigan State, Ohio State, and then NCAA tournament. You're on TV. And then my first job out of school, as I mentioned a little bit before, it was in Holland. And I land in this little place. They call it the Stilo Hall. And we nicknamed it the Stilo Dome to make it sound more glamorous. But this place probably fit like 700 people. Like it was tiny. They would wheel in like some extra little bleachers to add like 50 more people each game. And the floor, it was a wooden floor, so that was a bonus because not all places had wooden floors. Sometimes they're playing on a sport court or concrete, and this floor had maybe like 10 or 12 different colored lines. They were playing like volleyball and handball and some Holland sport called korfball. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. And so like I remember the first week, I'm like, which lines are the basketball lines? And our locker room was just like this little brick room with a wooden bench. Like that was it. Like there was nothing. And you're coming from all these nice facilities, and they've got training table meals for you. None of that. So so that was definitely an adjustment, just in the whole like vibe and feel. And then what was the other part of your question? The second part, JD. Sorry.
You're dealing with checks that may not cash.
Being paid. Yes.
May not be the most well-run businesses that you're playing
Yes.
for.
Yeah, exactly. So, and all these teams, they're supported by sponsors. So you have these big companies, supposedly, that are paying the team, and the team should filter that down to the players, but it doesn't always make it there. And I remember one of the first words I learned in Italy was domani, which means tomorrow. Like anytime I asked, hey, so am I getting paid? Hey, domani, domani, it's no problem, domani. And so I mean, I was in countries where they wouldn't pay you, or it would be very, very late, and you're like, all right, I guess I'm gonna have to leave the country and get on the next flight out of here if you guys aren't gonna pay me. And I was in Thailand one time, went through the whole season, had not gotten paid, and then he just hands me like this envelope full of like all this cash at the very end, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like literally like a couple hours before I'm gonna get on my flight to come back home. And when you're in these other countries, you have no recourse. Like there's no players union for slow white American dudes. Like there's no any of that. I mean, if you really want to get a lawyer, like good luck with that. But it was not going to pan out for you.
So speaking of Italy, what was your favorite food place to live?
Yeah, Italy for sure. Oh my
It
gosh,
was.
the pizza and pasta there was insane. It was so good. I tell my family stories about it all the time about how like fresh everything was. And I wasn't like a wine drinker at all, but wine is just everywhere. And so I'm just grabbing whatever at the, at the store. I'm like, all right, I'll try this, and like I'll be really Italian, I don't know if it was good or bad or whatever, but it was just kind of fun to be in Italy to drink wine. We actually, one of our sponsors was a restaurant. And so after practice, we would go and just order like whatever we wanted. And we ate like kings there. And I loved it. And my only disappointment in Italy is that the country was awesome, basketball was awesome, but I played terribly. I don't know what it was. I couldn't get the ball to go in the basket, and I was putting in a bunch of extra work, and just for whatever reason, I was out of sync, and I ended up getting cut a few months in, and I had landed kind of my dream spot. I'm like, man, I want to play here for a decade and just ride it out, even though they weren't really paying me at the time. It took them maybe like 3 years to get like my full payment from them, but it was an awesome experience overall. I wish I could get back there.
So what's the worst food then?
Oh man. Um, I didn't really play in a place where I didn't like the food, but I always have loved pizza and pasta ever since like sleepovers at Mike's house growing up, and his parents would always order the good stuff. We'd get Domino's, and I was like, oh man, this is living. And my house, we'd always have like frozen Tombstone pizzas. Mike went all out.
Well, funny enough, Tyler, like my two boys only want Domino's, and we live in Chicago with every great pizza place here, and they're just like, no, we want Domino's or Papa
Yeah,
John's.
yeah, yeah. That's
By the
funny.
way, Papa John's, please sponsor us.
Please better
you,
ingredients.
you mentioned something, Tyler, earlier about this one guy who just kind of shut down and it wasn't for him. Talk about the loneliness that is playing overseas as an American, and that's sometimes part of being a leader is dealing with loneliness. How did you cope with that?
Yeah, it's tricky. The first time you go overseas, I think, if you're going by yourself, because everybody's brand new. Like you haven't met any of these teammates, you don't speak the language. And so I remember being in Japan, and this happened all the time. I'd be in the locker room, and Japanese is a really hard language to learn. Like Spanish, I could get by, and I caught on pretty well. But in Japan, like we'd be sitting there, getting ready for practice, and guys are putting their gear on, and all of a sudden, everybody erupts in laughter, and I'm just like, "So what'd they say?" You know? And then like the one of the guys in broken English that did know English, he would, relay it to me. He's like, "Oh, this and that," and then and I'm like, "Oh, that is really funny," and I would laugh, but it was like the classic Silent Live, like, okay, you're like 8 years behind the joke. So, um, so that was always tricky. But as far as being lonely over there, I think the first couple of years were definitely challenging. My girlfriend is my wife now. She and I, like, it was long distance, so that was really hard. And then once she actually started coming with me, my third or fourth year, it just made life so much better because you felt like, okay, you got somebody in your corner and you got some family, and so something outside of basketball, because you might only be doing basketball for like a couple hours a day, and then like what are you doing with the rest of your day? You want to be able to enjoy it with somebody else. And so that made it so much better. Now it was, still a challenge in a lot of ways. Like when we started having kids, now okay, this is like a whole new part of things, and man, I have plenty of stories about how that was challenging. But it's hard being away, and you really have to just embrace where you are, and be able to adapt, because if you don't, and that goes for life, for us here in the States, and it really made me appreciate just what we do have here in the US. I mean, we're so blessed to live in this country with everything at our fingertips. I mean, you can go to a store and have a whole grocery aisle full of any kind of cereal you want. Overseas, it might be like two options. If you need to go see a doctor or get anything you need or start a business, like in the US, it's so simple to do that. And overseas, everything is just harder, takes more time, and a lot more resistance, especially if you're not native to the language and the scene.
Tyler, you're someone that played a lot of different sports. Growing up, you played baseball as well. And I'm just curious, what is your favorite sports movie? Or what is the best
Oh my
sports
gosh.
movie?
Oh, there are so many good ones.
And why
So
is it
many good
Rudy?
ones. Oh, Rudy. I now you say it, I feel bad because I haven't even shown my kids Rudy yet. I've tried to let's go. So there's so many I still need to show them. My middle daughter just watched with her at school today. They had a field trip to a little local theater and they watched uh, the running movie um,
Chariots of Fire?
USA. No. Oh gosh, something USA. McFarland
Oh,
USA with Kevin Costner. And so we enjoyed that. I got to meet one of the guys or hear one of the guys speak that was actually one of the runners in that movie. He came to our area last year. Anyway, best sports movie. Gosh, I always loved Blue Chips growing up that you referenced, Mike, where you're getting gym bags full of cash.
It is a good one.
You're getting
It
the
is.
tractor.
I recently showed the boys The Sandlot, and they really fell in love with that. And
Yes. Gosh.
James Earl Jones just passed away, and Max was so bummed. He was so sad to see that. He's like, I just really wanted to go over to his house and talk about baseball.
oh,
Yeah,
Yes. Oh,
but there's
that's
so many.
cute. That's
And
cute.
but my favorite, I think, is probably Bull Durham.
Yes. Boulder,
JD.
phenomenal. Yeah, I love that one. JD, what do you think?
yeah. For me, it's I'm a Notre Dame fan, so Rudy's big for me, but Hoosiers is one that every basketball season, I'm pulling out Hoosiers and watching it. I know Mike, you're a big Air Bud fan, so that's a
Love Airbud. Love him.
it's interesting because those sports movies really bridge things, right? My kids are various levels of liking sports and not being interested in sports, but that a team, and it can be a team in business, it can be a team on the field, it can be a team anywhere. That concept of team transcends, and it's so great. So, but now I've got to make my kids watch Rudy tonight. It's going to happen. But about sports being a bridge, though, it can be a bridge to understanding different cultures and ways of life. And you got to experience that, Tyler. How did you take those learnings into life beyond the court for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because I love working in teams. I've always played sports that were team oriented. Like you said, Mike, baseball. We played a bunch of little league together, which was fun, and basketball. I played a year of football in high school, which I loved. And you always, anytime you play in a team, you realize that okay, yes, there's more talented guys, less talented guys, but you have to have everybody um, work together. Otherwise, you'll never accomplish the goal you're setting out to win. And it's very simple in sports, and it's very easy to track and gauge success in a lot of ways because there's so many actual metrics. If you're either going to win the game in football or you're not, right? So, I was thinking about it today actually. Um, so. Uh, let's see, who's the guy? Amendola was the receiver for Tom Brady for many years up in with the Patriots. And everybody talks about Tom Brady. He's obviously the bigger name, but like Tom Brady can't run nearly as fast as Amendola. He can't make the cuts. He can't run the routes. He can't do what Amendola does. Even though we think of Tom Brady as like one of the greatest players of all time, Amendola, he cannot do what Tom Brady does. There's no way that guy can throw the ball like him or you know all the stuff that Tom Brady knows. So it's so neat to think about now, like in business. So I work with a medical device company. I lead a few different territories of medical device reps and managers. And there's, you have to have those guys in the field, in the operating room for orthopedic surgeries and those sales guys that are actually kind of driving it. But at the same time, we can't do all the operation stuff that we need. We need those implants to get to the hospital. We need all the trays and the instruments and everything to get there. And we can't do all that. So the operations guys are very behind the scenes, right? They're very backstage. They're not like the main actors on the stage that everybody knows. But I can't do my job without those guys. And they don't have any sales or any job to do if we don't do our job. So it's I love the idea that how important everybody is, and as a leader to really try and make people feel how important they are to the organization. I think that it's kind of sad when I read these stories about whatever the statistics are of like, yeah, 70%, 60% of people like don't even think their bosses really care about them at work. And I think as leaders, so much of it I learned maybe over the last probably 10 years or so is really just showing that you actively care about people and that you really want them to do well. And when they really feel like, oh man, this guy is engaged, he's not just some like guy that never actually doesn't actually understand the work I do. But like yesterday, I called into our office. I needed some things for a surgery, and I was talking to our person that answers the phone, and that's all she kind of does. Yeah, answers the phone, and she does some other things. But she had gone through a surgery recently, and so we started talking, just having a conversation. I think those kinds of interactions are super important to be able to just relate to people and make them feel that hey, what you're doing matters a ton, and I can't be effective. Our company can't be effective if you're not doing what you do. So really showing that appreciation, I think it is very high on my list of well, kind of leading any kind of organization, so that people feel like, hey, I want to be here. Because when people want to be somewhere, they're going to work 10 times harder for you than if they're just kind of punching the clock as a job.
Yeah, gratitude is very important. One last question for you, Tyler. A quick one. Back to basketball. You can put together a team, a starting team of 5 players, any era. Who are you picking?
Um, Definitely starting with Jordan because I grew up in Chicago in the '90s and was very lucky for that. So MJ in his prime for sure. Um, I think Kobe was also such a killer. I would love to have him. I absolutely loved Steve Nash. I thought Nash he was such a positive, upbeat guy, always trying to encourage his guys, and so crazy talented. And the passes that guy would throw was insane. Loved
He was a
having
great
him.
soccer player too.
Great soccer player. Oh my gosh. And he worked so hard at just being healthy, like in investing in himself to be healthy because he was always so banged up. Um, Loved his game, miss watching him play. And then for a big guy, like Shaq is just completely unstoppable and he's hilarious. So I would want him on my squad. And for somebody different, I would probably add my buddy Joe Crispin because I have never played with a guy with more confidence that ever. I think he just always believed like, dude, I can make any shot from anywhere. He's like a Steph Curry mindset before Steph Curry was even a real big deal. So I'm not saying he's better than Steph Curry. He's not, but it would be fun to play with him as well. So Shaq would make us laugh. Jordan and Kobe would get us all the points we could ever need, and maybe kill each other in the process, both being the alpha males. And then Joe and I could just kind of laugh watching it all and launch threes. So I'm what am I? I'm Steve Nash. He's run the show, and then I'll sub in and just set picks for guys.
I love it. And by the way, you only have one smack talker on there, really, because Jordan was a smack talker, right? He backed it up, but the rest, you pick nice guys. So I like the nice guy team. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a fun team, right? I mean, no matter what you're doing, where you're going, you want to have some fun with it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's such a fun question to consider and think about. Who's the greatest?
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for letting us pick your brain. And
Thanks, buddy.
there's so much more you can learn from Tyler. Called for Traveling is his book. You can get it at Amazon or wherever you get your books these days. But a great read. I highly recommend it. Tyler, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, guys. It was so much fun, and I can't wait to hear more of you guys' shows. Thank you.
What a great guy. Tyler has a ton of, we barely scratched the surface there, Mike. He's got a ton of great stories about his time as a basketball player, what it has taught him as a person. I highly recommend reading the book.
It's such a funny book. And what did you think of his team that he picked? His NBA team.
I appreciate the team. My team would be a little bit different. Jordan's definitely part of my team. But I'm a little older. You know, Larry Bird's got to be part of my team. Yeah,
Sure.
that guy was such an amazing shooter. Wilt Chamberlain is got to be part of my team as well. Kobe's great, but Steph shooting lights out. But then again, I'm going to have a team of all guards and Wilt. But why not?
Well, this was a great conversation with Tyler. His story is super compelling, especially considering he got to travel around the world and learn all these different cultures, try all this different food, and come back to write this very, very funny book. I highly recommend it.
Called for Traveling is the name of the book. Check it out again, wherever you get your books. Wonderful episode. Another one in the books. I love the fact we're hitting a lot of different type of people and getting those origin stories and leadership stories. And there's going to be more coming up next week.
Go kiss a nurse.